Hello, everyone. I'm Olympia. Thank you for being here with me in this wonderful place called Lights Out Library. And I have a great story to tell you. Once upon a time, Zeus, the king of all gods, had an affair with a mortal woman. He was used to it, and he had fathered various children with mortals, including Perseus, the grandfather of the young beauty he now fancied. Alcmene, that was her name. She had a face and eyes that were as charming and as irresistible as Aphrodite's, the goddess of love and beauty. Her wisdom was surpassed by no one, and it was said that she could please men like no other woman before her. Alcmene was married to Amphitryon. One day her husband went to war, and Zeus took the opportunity to trick her into sleeping with him. Using his divine powers, he gently convinced her that he was Amphitryon, returning home early from his expedition. That night, he stayed with her, and from that union she became pregnant. On the same night, her real husband returned, and Alcmene understood she had been tricked. But they also slept together, and she became pregnant again, now bearing twins from two different fathers. But Zeus had a wife too, the goddess Hera. And when she found out what her divine husband had done again, she entered into a jealous rage and swore to get revenge on the soon-to-be-born child of her husband. Zeus was a trickster, and so would she be. The king of gods knew that Alcmene was about to give birth, so Hera persuaded him to swear an oath that the next male to be born in the house of Perseus would become High King. Thinking he would grant the title to his own son, Zeus was happy to oblige. But as soon as he swore the oath, Hera went on with her plan. She knew that another son was to be born soon in the house of Perseus, Eurystheus. She hurried to Alcmene's dwelling and slowed the birth of her twins by forcing the goddess of childbirth to sit cross-legged, with her clothing tied in knots near the soon-to-be mother. This caused the twins to stay trapped in the womb, and then she caused Eurystheus to be born prematurely, making him the High King in place of Zeus's son. She too could fool her adulterous husband, whose son would have no title. Alcmene could finally have her twins, the son of Zeus named Alcides, and the son of Amphitryon, Iphicles. For fear of Hera's revenge, Alcmene exposed the infant, but he was taken up by the goddess Athena, who often protected heroes, the sons of gods with mortals. Athena brought him to Hera, who didn't recognize the child, and who also had a motherly instinct. Out of pity for the abandoned child, she nursed him. But the baby had so much vigor and suckled so strongly on her breast that he caused her pain. She pushed him away, and her milk sprayed across the heavens, forming the Milky Way. Athena brought the infant back to his real mother, and he was raised by his mortal parents. Alcides was a strong and brave little boy, but his parents knew that Hera had not been appeased and was still after him. She once sent 2 snakes to the twins' bedroom to bite Alcides, but the boy caught them without fear, broke their necks, and was later found by his parents playing with them. In an attempt to protect him from the goddess's wrath, they renamed him Heracles, glory of Hera, in the hope that this would appease her anger. It didn't, and after sending various ordeals his way, she plotted her big revenge. Heracles had reached adulthood in the city of Thebes. He had married the king's daughter, Megara, and had 3 children with her. His happiness and love for his family were unbearable to Hera. She inspired a fit of madness in Heracles. In his uncontrollable rage, he killed his entire family, his wife, and his children. Devastated by what he had done, Heracles fled to the Oracle of Delphi, the ancient sanctuary where resided Pythia, the priestess of Apollo, the oracle who could see the threads of the future and guide important decisions. Hera was still unsatisfied, and in a new blow she inspired the oracle so that it would direct Heracles to serve Eurystheus, the High King, the same Eurystheus who owed his title to Hera's actions when she had accelerated his birth. Heracles was told that his sin would be redeemed if he served Eurystheus for 10 years and accomplished any task he would be instructed to perform. Heracles accepted and went to Eurystheus, and he started a series of extraordinary accomplishments that would cement his legend. The 12 Labors. This is what we're going to explore tonight, together with many more aspects of ancient Greek mythology and culture. How did different myths connect between them? How were they elaborated? And I will tell you each story, as I just did, about Heracles' origins. So this is a new, long exploration journey to the past and to mythology that we are going to start. One that will take us to dangerous marshes, to the lairs of monsters like the Hydra, to the land of the Amazons, to the garden of Hesperides, and even to the underworld, the kingdom of death, and back. But before we continue with Heracles' 12 labors, I would like to take a few seconds of your time to let you know that we have a Patreon page for those of you who wish to and can support this project. Get more of it and listen ad-free on your favorite podcast app. Download all the episodes with and without ads. Participate in surveys, get advanced releases, and monthly bonus episodes published only on Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to contribute directly to our work financially. Our least expensive tier is $3.50 per month. But it doesn't mean you will get less. We let people contribute what they wish to or can, and everyone gets everything that is on our page. Because the world is a better place when the sun shines for everyone. We have added links to Patreon and other streaming options, which may be better suited for you. But before we begin, let's take a moment together to prepare for our journey ahead. If you'd like, gently close your eyes and let your daily concerns drift away. Find a position that feels natural and cozy. Perhaps make small adjustments until you're perfectly comfortable. Now draw in a deep, nourishing breath, and as you release it slowly, notice how your body responds. Feel the warmth flowing from your neck down through your shoulders, melting away any tension. Let your facial muscles become soft, your jaw loose, your fingers naturally open, and your legs completely at ease. As you settle into this peaceful state, my voice will be your gentle companion as we begin our exploration together. And now let's resume the story of Heracles, starting with his first labor. King Eurystheus attempted to give him various feats, also called labors, and the first one was to slay the Nemean Lion. In the northeastern part of the Peloponnese was a town called Nemea that lived in terror of a monstrous lion, a creature that couldn't be killed with weapons because it was protected by a magical golden fur. Its claws were sharper than the sharpest swords, and they could cut through any armor. Heracles hoped he could kill it at a distance with arrows, because he didn't know about its impenetrable fur. But when he found the lion and shot several arrows at it, he understood this would not work. As the arrows bounced off the creature, Heracles needed another plan. At night, the lion lived in a cave with two entrances. Heracles blocked one so that the creature wouldn't be able to escape. He was armed with a club that he used to stun the beast, and then he strangled it with his bare hands, making the magical golden fur useless. After slaying the lion, he tried to skin it with a knife, but he couldn't pierce the fur, even after sharpening the knife with a stone. Goddess Athena was watching him, and she inspired him to use one of the claws, because they were the sharpest weapons in the world, and it worked. Heracles turned the fur into a coat that he wore from this moment on, a coat that was impervious to the elements and most weapons, and would protect him for the rest of his adventures. He returned to Eurystheus, carrying the carcass of the lion on his shoulders. To the surprise of the king, Eurystheus told him that from now on, his labors would be increasingly difficult. Heracles was often depicted in antiquity, and after, with this fur cape and his club. This is the Nemean lion's skin. In this first labor, he shows the kind of courage, physical strength, and intelligence that are typical of Greek heroes. But what is a hero, actually? Because this is a word that is used a lot, and its meaning has evolved along history. Nowadays, the definition of a hero could be a person who is admired for extraordinary acts of bravery or fine qualities. It can be a real person, dead or alive, or even a fictional character, and so fictional that often the hero of a story is just the main protagonist, regardless of his or her capabilities and actions. In Greek antiquity, the meaning of hero was more restrictive. Heroes were warriors with an exemplary life, living and often dying in the pursuit of honor. They were commonly extraordinarily gifted and had divine blood. So heroes were mythical rather than real characters. They belonged in mythology and literature, and even a very brave real Greek warrior would never have been called a hero. So, among the various characters, the various persons, real or fictional, that we may call heroes nowadays, the modern sense of heroes as fictional characters like superheroes or the main protagonists in fiction in general is actually the closest to the ancient meaning of the word for the Greeks. And another characteristic of ancient Greek heroes was that they were always flawed. They could behave with arrogance almost like children. They could be too naive, sometimes foolhardy. They could embark on expeditions or ruin people's lives for trivial reasons. But generally, contrary to gods in ancient literature, heroes evolved. They didn't stand for a fixed concept or an aspect of the world like gods did. Greek gods, as in many other pantheons, represented or dominated something: war, thunder, the seas, the skies, love, death. They are depicted in ancient Greek literature with human like characteristics, in the sense that they have feelings, they have passions, they fight between them. They have a personality, but they never change. Heroes are much closer to humans, and they have a narrative associated with their existence. They always go on a journey where they discover the world and themselves. They learn, they face dilemmas, and they build a legacy that will survive them. The archetypal hero, apart from Heracles, is Achilles, who fought in the Trojan War on the side of the attackers, the Greeks. He is the character of the Iliad, the tale by the Greek poet Homer of the fight between the Trojans and the armies led by King Agamemnon. Achilles had superhuman strength on the battlefield, and he was protected by some of the gods, especially Athena. But he was also whimsical, able to lose his humanity and become uselessly cruel. For example, he withdrew from the war and came back, only to avenge his friend and lover, killed by Hector, another hero and Trojan prince who fought on the other side. Achilles killed Hector and dragged his body around the walls of the city to humiliate an enemy that was already dead. He was known for his uncontrollable rage that made him act unwisely, and he was clearly depicted as a flawed, imperfect hero. The main heroes were worshipped as half gods. They had their temples, and we know their lives and mythical accomplishments through literature, which developed multifaceted characters and told stories like probably no other culture before, at least in a written form that we know of. And because heroes change and they can die, they are relatable. They can be role models, and they can serve to tell cautionary tales. This makes them a bridge between mythology, religion, and literature. Their stories were not only entertaining, but they were also edifying. Maybe after the Greco Roman antiquity, when these characters receded in popular culture and disappeared in religion, their cult disappeared. The saints replaced them culturally, be it in the Christian or Muslim traditions. There are saints whose lives are exemplary, but not exemplary because they were born perfect, rather because they went on a heroic journey of a spiritual nature. They accomplished great things, miracles. They are not heroes in the classical sense of the term, but maybe they played the same role in popular culture as a replacement for these ancient heroic figures that were very famous in antiquity. In ancient Greece and later in Rome, heroes were a big part of popular culture. They were absolutely not obscure characters, only known by a minority. But we have many more things to discover about mythology and antique culture. So for now, let's return to Heracles and his second labor. The second labor was a trap prepared by Hera, who kept tormenting Heracles. She had raised a terrifying monster just to slay Heracles, the Hydra, and she inspired Eurystheus to demand Heracles kill it. The Hydra was a water monster, looking like a giant snake with multiple heads. Its lair was a lake, the Lake of Lerna, which was known to be one of the entrances to the underworld. The monster was unapproachable because its breath was poisonous, and it was so toxic that just the scent of the creature was deadly. It had multiple heads, and even more terrifying was the creature's ability to regrow them when a head was chopped. Two new heads replaced it, so that the creature became more and more powerful as it fought. Only oblivious warriors would have dared to attack such an invincible monster. Upon reaching the swamp near Lake Lerna, the creature's lair, Heracles covered his face with a cloth so that the poisonous fumes could not affect him. The Hydra's lair was a spring, a cave where it stayed most of the time and emerged from time to terrorize the villages around. Heracles shot flaming arrows at the cave to force the monster to appear. And when it did, he confronted it. The fight began, and Heracles repeatedly chopped heads, but more kept replacing them due to the monster's evil regeneration powers. The fight looked hopeless and short of solutions. Heracles had to back down, and the Hydra returned to its lair. Realizing that he couldn't beat the Hydra in this way, Heracles called for help from his nephew, the son of his twin. His nephew Iolaus was astute and inspired by Athena. He had the idea of cauterizing the open stems immediately after Heracles would chop the heads, which would prevent new heads from regrowing. They returned together to Hydra's lair and confronted it again. But Hera was watching, and seeing that Heracles was now winning the struggle, she sent a giant crab to the scene to distract him. But Heracles crushed it, and now the Hydra had only one head left, its immortal head that would live on even separated from the body. Athena gave Heracles a magical golden sword, and with it he could cut off the last head that kept the creature alive. Then he placed the head under a rock and dipped his arrows in Hydra's poisonous blood. His second task was complete, and again he came out of it stronger. He returned to Eurystheus for his next assignment. The Hydra, like the lion before, was a chthonic creature. Maybe you've heard this term associated with the world of H.P. Lovecraft, the author of horror novels. The word chthonic means subterranean. There were several words in Greek for earth. One that is more famous is Gaia, which refers to the surface of the land. Cthulhu is another word for earth, but it means in or under the earth. So a chthonic creature came from under the earth or from the underworld. But there were chthonic deities too, deities living under the earth, such as Hades, the god of the dead, and the king of the underworld, or Persephone, the daughter of the goddess of fertility and agriculture. Demeter, who had been captured by Hades. These chthonic gods were worshipped and offered sacrifices differently from Olympian gods, the pantheon of gods governed by Zeus, who lived on Mount Olympus. The origin of this distinction between chthonic and Olympian gods and the way their cults performed their rituals is not well known. Some archaeologists have supposed that chthonic deities could be remnants of the religion that existed in Greece many centuries before the emergence of what we call Greek civilization. It is believed that the Proto-Greeks arrived in the south of the Balkans in the 3rd millennium BC. They settled in Greece, but little is known of their predecessors. The populations probably mixed, and we don't know much either about their reciprocal contributions to the emergence of Greek culture. But maybe to an extent, the myth and the religion in ancient Greece were influenced by the pre-Greek or pre-Hellenic cultures. So back to the labors, because I still have many more to tell you. Heracles had triumphed once again against the terrifying creature. Eurystheus was inspired by Hera, and like her, wanted Heracles to fail. So, as monsters couldn't get rid of him, they came up with a new task, one that would not involve killing a beast, and that Heracles would really be unable to complete. In Greece lived yet another fantastical creature, a hind, a female deer that was sacred to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and animals. The hind had golden antlers and hooves of bronze. It was a shy and harmless animal, but it was so fast that it was said it could outrun an arrow in flight. Eurystheus, speaking for Hera, asked Heracles to capture the hind, and that looked like a perfect plan. The hind was too fast to be captured, and Heracles' strength would be useless. But even if he did capture it, this would anger Artemis for the desecration of her animal, and she would punish him for the offense, probably by death. It seemed the plan couldn't fail, whatever Heracles would do. So, as his third labor, Heracles was sent to capture the hind. He had begun the search. One morning, as he awoke, he caught the glimmer of the hind's golden antlers and began to follow it on foot. Whenever he drew near, the swift creature simply sped up again, slipping out of his reach with ease. Days passed, weeks passed. Heracles kept chasing the hind all over Greece, and even beyond, to the land of the Hyperboreans, north of Greece. Months passed, and finally, one day, his perseverance was rewarded. The hind was distracted for just a second, and he took advantage of it. The animal was caught. Heracles returned with the hind. But on his way back, he encountered Artemis and her brother, Apollo. He begged the goddess for forgiveness, explaining that catching the hind was part of his penance and that he hadn't chosen this labor. He promised to return it as soon as the animal would have been presented to Eurystheus. Artemis was not as bitter and vindictive as Hera, and so she understood and forgave him. Eurystheus and Hera's plan had failed again. When Heracles presented the hind to the king, he was told the creature would become part of his collection of exotic animals. But Heracles could not let this happen, because he had promised to return it. So he agreed to surrender it, but only on the condition that Eurystheus come out in person to take it from him. The king came out, but it was a trick. Heracles released the hind, and it immediately darted back to its divine mistress, leaving the king with no hope of ever catching it. Heracles blamed Eurystheus for not being quick enough, and he could get away with the tricky situation he was in. There are different versions of this labor. In other versions, Heracles captures the hind when it's asleep, and he traps it with a net, because, as the rest of mythology, these tales were told and written by multiple authors, Greek initially and then Roman. Rome adopted a great deal of Greek myths and gods, together with many other aspects of Greek culture and science. The 12 labors of Heracles were initially 10, or maybe even less. But as new chapters were added to the story, it changed. Eurystheus would have demanded 10 labors. This is a point of the story that was solid, well established. But as new chapters, new labors were added, authors needed to reconcile the 10 labor storyline with a tradition that now contained 12 different tasks performed by Heracles. So later, after the classical period of Greek culture, a little variation was added. 2 labors were disqualified by Eurystheus: the slaying of the Hydra, because Heracles had received help from his nephew, and another one I'll tell you about later. This is why Heracles had to go through 12 labors to finish the list of 10 Eurystheus and Hera gave him. There are also episodes involving centaurs, half men, half horse creatures, and the wisest of them all, Chiron, who had received the gift of immortality, or Prometheus, the Titan credited with stealing fire from the gods to give to men. These characters appear in different labors depending on the versions, but they are going to be featured in our next labor, because after 3 labors, Heracles was not even halfway into his penance, and he was now ready for his 4th assignment. A fast-running creature had been no match for Heracles, so this time Eurystheus and Hera returned to a dangerous animal. In the primitive highlands of Arcadia, a place where no humans in their right mind would go, because it was populated by wild creatures that ate human flesh, lived a monstrous boar, a giant wild pig. The animal stayed on Mount Erymanthos, but sometimes it entered in a rage that made it run around the country and lay waste to the farmers' fields. The wild boar was dangerous, and so were the inhabitants of Mount Erymanthos. A large group of centaurs lived there with their chief, Chiron. Heracles may be able to defeat one monster at a time, but what could he do against dozens of monsters? So they instructed the hero to capture the boar. What the conspirators ignored was that Heracles was friends with Pholus, a kind and hospitable centaur. He visited his friend on his way to Mount Erymanthos. They soon went to a forest cavern to eat, and Heracles asked for wine. Pholus had a jar of wine, an ancient gift from Dionysius, the god of winemaking and madness. Pholus agreed to open the jar, but that was foolish of him. The smell of wine attracted the other centaurs. They started to drink and became mad. Centaurs were only half human. They were naive and brutal creatures, so they attacked Heracles. Our hero had to shoot at them with his poisonous arrows, which made them retreat to Chiron's cave. Chiron was immortal and wisest among creatures. So once the creatures had scattered, Heracles visited him to gain advice on how to catch the boar, because the animal was at the same time very fast and very strong. Chiron told him to drive it into thick snow. The snow would slow down the boar and exhaust it, and so it was done. Heracles caught the boar, bound it, and returned to Eurystheus. The king was so frightened of the monster that he hid inside a half-buried jar used for storage, and begged Heracles to get rid of the beast, which the hero did. It seemed that killing or capturing creatures was definitely not the kind of task that would make Heracles fail. So 3 days later, when he had recovered his temper, Eurystheus gave him a new labor. He was sent to clean the stables of King Augeas. Augeas owned the largest stables in Greece, and they housed the single greatest number of cattle in the country. The livestock was also immortal and produced an enormous quantity of manure. The task of cleaning these stables looked so discouraging that they had never been cleaned. It was even impossible to enter the stables, and they were known all around Greece for being the filthiest place in the entire country. Heracles had gained glory capturing or slaying monsters, and Eurystheus understood it had been a mistake to give him the opportunity to shine. Cleaning stables would not only be impossible, but it was also humiliating. As Heracles left for King Aegeus' palace, Eurystheus rubbed his hands with glee, already imagining how the glorious hero would be ridiculed. Heracles visited Augeas and offered to clean his stables. The king accepted and even offered Heracles 1/10 of his cattle if the job was finished in one day. He didn't think for a second this was possible. But all had underestimated Heracles' ingenuity. Instead of trying to clean the stables directly, he used nature to do the work. There were 2 rivers passing nearby. Heracles dug ditches and diverted them to make them pass through the stables. And so, in just a few hours, the rushing water swept everything away, leaving the stables clean and renewed. When he returned to Augeas to claim his prize, 1/10 of the cattle, the king reacted angrily. He refused to honor the agreement, arguing that the rivers, not Heracles, had done the work. The king's sons supported their father, except one, Phyleus. Heracles killed them all and gave the kingdom to Phyleus. He then returned to Eurystheus, but just like Augeas, the king refused to count this labor as completed, claiming that the waters had done the work and insisting that Heracles had been paid for his efforts. With his labor of slaying the Hydra also disqualified because he had received help, Heracles had completed 5 tasks, but only 3 were finally accepted, leaving 7 more. The main theme in this 5th labor is the use of ingenious intelligence to achieve what otherwise looked impossible. This is a recurring theme in Greek mythology, and so is the idea that nature can be put to work by man to multiply his output and his well-being. This conception of the world, that nature is a force that can be and should be tamed by the intellect and technique, is a specificity of Greek culture. Technically, it is something that all civilizations did, of course. Agriculture, tools, or the use of fire are ways to use nature to our advantage. But the Greeks theorized and praised it. This way of thinking spread to other ancient cultures, especially Romans, and eventually became a lasting trait of Western thought, for better or worse. More than 25 centuries ago, the seeds of this relationship between humankind and nature were already present in this myth, not only in the labors of Heracles, but also in the tale of Prometheus, who brought fire from the gods to mankind. We see the belief that through knowledge and skill, humans can rise above their limits. They gain the power to shape the natural world and draw a little closer to the realm of the divine. And once again, this rise in ingenuity would prove essential in the sixth labor. For his sixth labor, Eurystheus sent Heracles to slay a swarm of birds dwelling in a swamp in a region called Stymphalia. These birds were a plague to the entire region. Their beaks were bronze, their feathers were of metal and sharp. They could launch them at their victims, and everywhere they went, they left poisonous dung. They had migrated to a swamp in Stymphalia, bred and multiplied. From their nesting place, they swarmed over the countryside. They ate crops and fruits, and they attacked people. Some had tried to hunt them, but the birds had wounded and killed their attackers with their beaks that were sharp enough to pierce any armor. Heracles walked to the marsh where they nested, but he didn't reach the nests of the birds because the grounds would not support his weight. Once again he was in trouble. But goddess Athena was watching. She gave him a rattle that could be very noisy, and Heracles understood how he could make good use of it. He climbed to the top of a mountain that overhung the swamp and shook the rattle. The birds were frightened into the air. Quick as lightning, Heracles shot many of them with his poisonous arrows. The rest escaped far away, never plaguing the region again. He brought some of the dead birds to Eurystheus as proof of his success and was now ready for his seventh labor. The first six labors had taken place in the Peloponnese, the south of Greece, except for the hunt of the hind that had taken Heracles further to the north. For this new assignment, Hera and Eurystheus decided it was time to send Heracles far away to capture the Cretan Bull on the island of Crete, the kingdom of Minos. For a long time already, this bull had terrorized Crete, and Minos was not innocent of it. At the beginning of his reign in Crete, he had prayed to Poseidon, the god of the seas and protector of Crete, to send him a white bull as a sign of his right to rule rather than any of his brothers. Poseidon has sent Minos the bull, larger than any other and white as snow, with the understanding that the animal would be sacrificed to him. When Minos saw the bull, he found it so extraordinary, so fine, that he did not want to sacrifice it. So he sent the animal to his herds and substituted another inferior bull for sacrifice. But gods couldn't be fooled so easily. Poseidon saw that the king had tried to keep the gift, and he decided to punish him. He asked goddess Aphrodite to make the queen, Pasiphae, fall in love with the bull, and Aphrodite made it happen. Of this unnatural affair, a half-man, half-bull creature was born, the Minotaur. Then Poseidon passed on his rage to the bull, causing it to sow destruction upon the island. Desperate about what he could do, Minos consulted the oracle at Delphi, after which he ordered the construction of the labyrinth to hold the Minotaur. But the Minotaur's father, the bull, and had been wreaking havoc on Crete for years. It leveled walls, destroyed orchards, and uprooted crops. Minos gave Heracles permission to take away the bull. Heracles captured it and shipped it to Eurystheus. This chapter of the myth refers to the cult of the bull, which was very ancient in Crete and the southwest of Anatolia. We know it dates back several thousand years thanks to archaeological discoveries. The iconography around the bull was very present in Minoan culture, which was the culture of Crete before it was integrated into the Greek world. The bull was a chthonic animal, that is to say, from the underground. You remember we talked about chthonic cults earlier, and Greek myth about bulls such as the Cretan Bull and the Minotaur are probably a product of the integration of these cultures. But actually, this labor of Heracles was added later, after most of the other labors, and maybe as a result of the connection between Crete and the city of Athens. Another famous myth that I told you about in another story is the labyrinth and the Minotaur. It also includes this connection between Athens and Crete, because the starting point in the myth of the labyrinth is this mythical tradition of sending young Athenians to the labyrinth, where they would be offered in sacrifice to the Minotaur. Heracles was now ready for his 8th labor, and this one would take him to Thrace, the northeast of Greece. Eurystheus sent him to capture and bring back a terrifying herd of 4 mares, or horses that fed on human flesh, and belonged to the king of Thrace, Diomedes. The king fed them with servants that had displeased him, or guests that expected to find shelter in his palace and ran to their death instead. Diomedes was a half-god too, like Heracles, a son of Ares, the god of war, and a princess. From his father he had inherited the cruelty and brutality, and there was no negotiating with him. The mares had to be stolen. Hera and Eurystheus hoped that this new trap would finally get rid of Heracles. Not only were the 4 mares dangerous, so was their owner, and he was a king and a half-god. Heracles traveled to Thrace. He took the horses, but soon he was chased by Diomedes and his men. In their stable, the horses were kept tethered to a manger. But as soon as he freed them, they became hard to control, and the hero needed all his strength to keep them together and avoid being eaten alive. With the horses bound with a chain, he traveled by day and rested by night on his way back to Greece. But the king approached, and Heracles had to fight him. He won the fight, killed Diomedes with an axe, and fed the body to the horses to calm them. As soon as they finished eating their previous owner, the horses became calmer. Heracles took the opportunity to bind their mouths shut, and he could easily take them back to Eurystheus. The king dedicated the horses to Hera, and this is how Heracles completed his 8th labor. For his 9th labor, Eurystheus was willing to please his daughter. She wanted the belt of Hippolyta, the queen of the Amazons. Hippolyta was a daughter of Ares, and her father had often given her his belt as a symbol of her power over the feared tribe of the Amazons, a tribe of warrior women. The Amazons lived far away from Greece, on the coasts of the Black Sea, and Heracles gathered a group of companions to set sail to their land. When they arrived, Queen Hippolyta received him well, as the Amazons respected strength and had heard of his exploits. She agreed to give him the belt, but Hera was watching again and would not let him succeed so easily. She took the appearance of an Amazon and walked among them, sowing seeds of distrust. She claimed Heracles came to abduct the queen or kill her. The Amazons were alarmed and set off on horseback to confront him. But when Heracles saw them approaching, he thought Hippolyta had been plotting all along and would not hand over the belt. Enraged, he killed the queen, took the belt, and escaped by sea. The Amazons could not go after him on horseback, and he managed to return safely to the court of Eurystheus with the belt, accomplishing his 9th labor. The Amazons were a recurring myth in ancient Greece. Depending on the authors, they were located in different places, the north or the south of Anatolia, of Turkey, or even the coast of Libya. They appeared in the Trojan War on the side of Troy. They fought against the Greeks. Maybe the myth has roots in the existence of female warriors in the steppes north of the Black Sea. Tombs of such warriors have been discovered, but the term Amazon has passed to modern language to name warrior women in general. It is also the reason why the largest forest and river in the world are called Amazon. When the first explorers arrived in Brazil, they named them after the mythical land, maybe after seeing native people with long hair that made them think about female warriors. The myth of the Amazons has also sparked interest among psychologists and psychoanalysts because it obviously relates to the sexuality and the representation of women in Greek society. Ancient Greece was extremely patriarchal. Women could not be citizens or participate in public life. They are present in mythology, but always in a secondary position. They always matter more because of the feelings and the actions they inspire in men. They are never subjects in the sense that they cannot modify their destiny thanks to their will or their abilities. In this context, Amazons are a strange and a bit scary myth. They don't need men. They go to war. They form their own political community. For the male authors who wrote about them, they probably reflect a mix of repulsion and fascination as a counter model of Greek society. Now that Heracles had returned from the land of the Amazons, he was ready for his 10th labor. Eurystheus and Hera decided to send him even further away, this time to the extreme west of the Mediterranean Sea. He was asked to obtain the cattle of Geryon, a giant who dwelt on an island where the sun set. Geryon was a terrifying monster with 3 heads. He owned a 2-headed hound, which was the brother of Cerberus, the 3-headed hound that watched the doors of hell. But his cattle were the most magnificent in the world. That was a long journey, and Heracles had to cross the Libyan desert to travel to Geryon's island. Frustrated by the heat and exhausted by the distance, he shot an arrow at the sun out of anger. Helios, the sun, was impressed by his courage and gave him a gift, a magical golden cup that he used to sail across the sea from west to east each night. Thanks to the cup, Heracles could arrive at the island in a few hours. But as soon as he landed, the 2-headed dog attacked him. The hound was no match for Heracles, who killed him with one blow of his club. The noise attracted Geryon, who sprang into action, his 3 heads wearing 3 helmets. The giant was far too massive to be defeated with a club, and his many heads made it impossible to hide from him. But Heracles had his poisonous arrows. He shot one so forcefully that it pierced the giant's forehead. Geryon was dead, and Hercules could return to Greece with the cattle. But the journey was very long, and Hera was there again to stop him. She sent a gadfly to bite the animals, causing them to scatter. It took Heracles a full year to retrieve them. In another attempt to stop him, Hera sent a flood that raised the level of a river so much that Heracles could not cross with the animals. But the hero was never short of resources and energy. He piled stones into the river to make it shallower. After several more months, he finally reached the court of Eurystheus, where the cattle were sacrificed to the whimsical goddess. Heracles now had only 2 labors left to complete his penance, and Hera and Eurystheus were beginning to worry that he would succeed. How to make things even more difficult for him? Maybe by sending him to a place nobody could locate. This is how the idea for his 11th labor appeared. Eurystheus demanded Heracles to bring 3 of the golden apples from the garden of Hesperides. The Hesperides were the nymphs of the evening, the daughters of the sunset who lived in the west. The supernatural beings were the daughters of the Titan Atlas. They looked after an orchard, a garden that belonged to Hera, where extraordinary golden apples grew. The goddess was very fond of this garden. When her marriage with Zeus took place, different deities came with nuptial presents for her. Among them, the goddess of earth, Gaia, who offered branches having golden apples on them. Hera greatly admired these branches and begged Gaia to plant them in her garden. The Hesperides were given the task of taking care of the garden, but they occasionally picked apples for themselves. So, to watch the nymphs, Hera also placed a never-sleeping dragon as a guard. The location was far away to the west, where the Mediterranean Sea and the world ended. It was unknown and well protected. There was no way Heracles would triumph this time. The hero didn't know where to look for the garden, so he went to one of the most ancient gods in the world, the primordial father of waters, the old man of the sea, a god older than Poseidon himself. The old man of the sea had no sympathy for Hera, and he helped him, indicating the way to the garden of the Hesperides. When Heracles arrived, he found Atlas the Titan, who carried the heaven on his shoulders, and he tricked Atlas into retrieving golden apples for him. He offered the Titan to hold up the heavens for a while, so that Atlas could go take the apples in the garden. Atlas accepted, and the Hesperides, or the dragon, did not worry, as he was the father of the nymphs. When Atlas returned with 3 stolen apples, he decided that he didn't want to take the heavens back, and would instead let Heracles do the work. But Heracles had thought about it before. He accepted to let Atlas go to Greece, deliver the apples to Eurystheus, on the condition that the Titan would take the heavens back just for a short moment, so that he would be able to adjust his cloak more comfortably. The naive Titan agreed and took the heavens back, but Heracles just walked away with the apples, leaving Atlas to his fate. The 11th labor was completed. Eurystheus and Hera were dismayed again at his triumph and tried to imagine the most difficult labor they could think of, and they came up with his 12th labor. Heracles was asked to go to the underworld and capture Cerberus, the 3-headed giant dog that was the guardian of the gates of the underworld. The underworld was a terrifying place where Hades reigned and dictated the rules. Mortals kept trapped there, and even heroes like Theseus had not been able to return. To prepare for his descent into the underworld, Heracles went to Athens to be initiated into its mysteries. God Hermes and Athena guided him along so that he would be ready. Heracles descended through a cavern that was one of the entrances to the underworld, and after some time in this dark place, he found Hades and asked the god for permission to bring Cerberus to the surface. Hades knew about the labors and how Hera had repeatedly tried to cheat against Heracles. He gave his permission, but on one condition: the hero would have to subdue the beast without using weapons. Heracles overpowered Cerberus with his bare hands and succeeded again. Then he went up and returned to the Peloponnese to bring it to Eurystheus. The king was terrified again and fled to the big jar where he had already hidden when presented with the wild boar. He was so scared that he offered Heracles to release him from any further labors if he returned Cerberus to the underworld. And so it was done. After years of service to Eurystheus and 12 imposing tasks, in which he had succeeded thanks to his bravery, strength, and intelligence, Heracles was finally free and washed off the sins Hera had made him commit. But the 12 labors had not only erased the past, but they had also made him stronger, more knowledgeable, and wiser. Through this initiatory journey, he had learned about the world, about himself. He had thought, and so have we, as we followed his steps. But we have now reached the end of our journey. You may now let go and fall asleep. Or if you're not sleepy yet, you may pick another story from my ever-growing library. And until we meet again, good night. Sleep well.